James is from. I think any she requires to do really nothing in this area that is pertinent to what we're doing. They don't do this government
So you come by when I was coming out of Broad Street Hollow, and I knew it was you. So the flatbed with the running lights on it. Broad Street Hollow Road, when I come out, that's where I live. I saw you come by with a freight train, the running lights, and it was cool to see.
Yeah, this week.
Some pass.
We don't have
Get a set of change.
Yeah, I guess that's his stuff. It's a really
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it was real bad, it would have
I've seen that.
It's impassable.
Realize otherwise you can't run.
Nobody burnt out.
Yeah, it's just called but when you have to decide, opposed to the 7 now is 5 feet, should be 25 feet. That's in the where the
Physical street address.
so that is the side. It is the side.
The side goes down, not the rear. The side is. Should be his front. Nice got
This side.
Somebody put a comment as we're water is
Judy sprays it. It's crazy. Trust water again. She sprays it with the water.
You don't have any electric lights.
Yeah, but yeah.
This is what is the application?
Tree.
It is good at the
It sprays it. It doesn't seem to progress.
Okay, so where is
Just
this?
that little moisture keeps things in the direction. Yeah.
Oh, really?
There's only one building. Other than the green space, but that's not, it's not. There's another structure there, where is he, not too far away? Not too far. So where's their 5-foot structure?
Electronic engineer, major stuff.
So we.
That's where what happened? Oh, something happened.
Where's ours?
That's what I'm trying to look for. I don't want to make it harder for you, but this is, so if it comes down to it, we have both looked, we don't know. Is this?
Because it's got structures and materials, so does the zoning.
Yeah.
But it also means structures, flight and material as well as structure. Yeah. Building something.
Keith made
That's a constitute structure.
Oh, yeah, you're out.
What's that? I almost forgot. They said we did this.
You said you're going to be here in 5 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. You want to start doing pledge of allegiance? We can do that. Oh, we have to order.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I need a motion to open hearing.
Make a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll second.
Initially, you won't.
I just heard one voice in here. Okay, I'm going to read the ad now. You ready?
Yes.
Notice is hereby given that the Town of Shandaken Zoning Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing pursuant to 274 and/or 276 of the state law, and as prescribed in the district schedule of area and bulk regulations of the Shandaken Township Code, for the purpose of hearing the following application regarding an area variance application submitted by Jeff Collins for a parcel located at 27 through 29 Risley Road, Mount Trumper, New York, 12457, indicated as section number 25.10, block number 4, lot number 27. The public hearing will be scheduled for Wednesday, December 20th in the Town Hall building, 7:30.
Who's speaking first? If anyone would like to speak and has not signed the sheet here, please do so.
Lee Delvecchio's first.
Good evening. My name is Phil Wellner. I'm an attorney representing Mr. Delvecchio. I know Mr. Delvecchio also wanted to make a few comments, but he asked me to come here today because this parcel is actually the subject of an ongoing lawsuit between Mr. Delvecchio and Mr. Collins that's currently pending in Ulster County Supreme Court. From my perspective, what I've come here to ask the board to consider is the current use of this property, as I'm sure the board is aware, is far beyond the scope of any variances that Mr. Collins has been granted. This stone yard was originally granted as a very small use variance, a couple hundred feet by a couple hundred feet. From what I can tell, based on some documents that Mr. Delvecchio, I think, intends to present to the board, based on Mr. Johnson's original recommendation, there was some personal hardship that Mr. Collins presented, and based on that anecdotal request for a small variance based on some personal hardship, it was granted, but the recommendation of a site plan review, that wasn't adopted apparently. There's never been a site plan review, and what was a couple hundred feet by a couple hundred feet now encompasses the entire 3.5 acres or so that Mr. Collins owns. Mr. Delvecchio's property and the remaining properties in the neighborhood are subjected to noise pollution 6 days a week throughout the operating season, which I understand to be March through about October or so for Mr. Collins. Backhoes, tractor trailers, other heavy trucks operating 6 days a week. the noise is significant. The dust generated by the operation from moving stone and moving other building materials is significant. The dust settles everywhere. I think Mr. Delvecchio will tell you that 6 days a week for most of the year, he can't keep his windows open because so much dust comes into the house that it settles everywhere, and he literally has to dust it every single day. The noise pollution and the dust pollution has been an ongoing problem for about 10 years or so since Mr. Collins expanded to the size of the operation that you have now. And I would submit to the board that his application now is seeking to reward his lack of consideration for the original variance and his flouting of the zoning regulations. It's rewarding it. To approve it would essentially be to reward bad behavior because Mr. Collins has expanded so far. One question I would place to the board is why this also isn't a request for a use variance, because the use that was described in the original variance, again, is limited to a very small area, and the scope of his operations now, I would argue, is far outside the use variance that he's been granted. So the question that I'd ask you as the board to consider, when you look at the legal standard for granting a use variance, two of the things to consider are, does it change the character of the neighborhood? I think you'll hear not only from Mr. Delvecchio, but maybe some other adjoining landowners, that this area has been severely impacted. The neighborhood character has completely been changed. Before the stone yard, this was a residential area. There were houses, people lived there. There wasn't essentially an industrial operation going on that created a lot of noise, a lot of dust, a lot of traffic of heavy trucks. So it's not a question of, will this variance, if it's granted by the board, change the character of the neighborhood? The character has already changed. It would be ratified by the board, and we would ask that the board deny the application so that the neighborhood could be restored to its original character, which all these landowners enjoyed. And I think you'll hear from Mr. Delvecchio, perhaps from some other landowners, the value of their properties has decreased significantly by, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars, based on the presence of noise, the presence of the dust, the operation that's going on within feet of their house without any form of screening, without any dust remediation, any noise remediation, anything like that. The other question that I'd ask you to pose, again, along the lines that this is, at least in part, it should be a request for a use variance, is the hardship here self-created? And again, I would submit that the answer is yes. When Mr. Collins first owned this property, it was a residential piece of property. He lived there. I believe that he lived there with his late wife. He chose to try and start a business there, and the need for the variance arose not because of the conditions of his property or the fact that, let's say, he was in an industrial area, but his parcel for some reason couldn't be used in a profitable way. He chose to start a business in a residential area, and a business which my client and I think some of the other neighbors would agree is not compatible with homes that close. And he chose to do so, and he expanded it, and in the process of doing that, he created his own hardship. Those two things alone, I think, should disqualify Mr. Collins from getting the approval that he's seeking here. But even beyond that, again, what I would turn back to is the fact that the expansion of the stone yard has taken place over the course of 10 years. Mr. Delvecchio has some pictures from Google Earth that show the progression of not only the expansion of the stone bins and the other material holding facilities, but the clearing of the trees also, to the point where this is a very visible operation and an operation that can be easily heard by all the surrounding homes. So what I would ask on behalf of Mr. Delvecchio, and I think he has some comments he'd like to make too, is that the board deny the application because Mr. Collins has already impermissibly changed the character of the neighborhood. He's already impermissibly expanded the scope of his operations, and he's done so to the detriment of all the surrounding landowners with impunity. And we ask that be put to a stop. Thank you.
Good evening. I have some documentation that applies to the original variance and the photographs from Google, which I took from 1995 to present. You'll be able to see what went on over the years. Everybody has a right to make a living, but not at the expense of others. Our quality of life has been tremendously impacted. I live in a home that I built by hand with the doors and windows shut, so I don't have to listen to the noise and put up with the dust. I've got a screened-in porch in the back of my house I can't even sit in. It's like living next to a non-stop construction site. The payloader, the beep-beep, the jake breaking, the tailgate slamming, the stone saw, the dust, it's horrendous. Occasions this year, there was an acidy smell coming out of there on several occasions. It's like you could taste it, it was so thick in the air. Unfortunately, I'm downwind, downstream, downhill. I've been after Glenn Miller, Gina, everyone who is supposed to do something about this. The code enforcement officer has done nothing. Gina lied to my face 3 times. I caught her at my house when I was building. She was there inspecting me. What's going on over here? I'll look into it. Gina, he's moving the trailer. He's expanding the stone yard. No, he isn't. What's where the trailer was? Stone. Larger, larger, larger. Not only is the quality of our life horrendously impacted, so is the property value of everybody bordering that. I had 2 professional appraisals done, 2 different years. And they told me outright, I'm going to have a hard time selling this place. I said, well, if I don't sell it, I'll rent it. I don't think anybody's going to rent it and want to listen to this nonsense going on. I invite you to come there. Just sit there for a couple hours and listen to it. It's to the point where Easter weekend, he not only operates 6 days a week, holiday weekends. Got the grandkids coming in the house with their hands over their ears. Can you make the noise stop? He's scaring us. They won't go outside. The first time her son came up, he went outside in the screened-in porch. I'm going to take a nap for an hour or so. I'm tired. I just drove 3 hours. 20 minutes later, he came in the house. What are they building next door? Really? That goes on nonstop, Scott. Nonstop. No one would do anything about it. I finally started pressuring Warren. When was the war? In May we sat down? And it's now December. On him. Phone calls after phone call. Finally getting somewhere with it. No one else will do anything about it. How could this possibly happen? It was quiet with the original variance. Selling landscaping and building stone, you had a forklift there. Couldn't hear it, couldn't see it. When the 2 girls that owned the property next to me had the property surveyed, as soon as the border was located, there was a clear cut done. Down came all the trees, over an acre. They had a green burn going. Pete Estes, it's on record, you can find it. The alarm company called me, told me my house was on fire. There was so much smoke. Jeff called me right after they did. Anybody calling you? Yeah, my house is on fire, Jeff. No, I got a green burn going. The 2 girls went over to talk to him, see what he was doing, what's going on. Why'd you push the stone yard up to our backyard? Wouldn't talk to them. Gave him the back of his head. I mean, horrendous. This is my retirement home. I thought it was. I'm ready to get out. I'm in the process of trying to buy property down in Hurley. I can't stand it anymore. It's making me ill. It's horrendous. And I can't believe my other neighbors don't say anything. Everybody's putting their head down, their tail between their legs. It's outrageous. I don't know what more to say. I mean, people aren't blind. Everybody goes by there. Everybody lives in the community. You go by it, you see it, and it's blind eye, deaf ears. I watched what happened with Al Higley in the fruit stand. 10 feet, boom, stop, done. Here, 38,000 square feet. No one wants to do anything. Let's go back to the original variance and originally what we were supposed to do. That's all I'm asking. I got a built-in pool I don't even go out in. You can't listen to that stuff. That payloader goes non-stop with the rattle, the beep, beep, beep. It's crazy. It's literally insane, gentlemen. I don't know what more to say to you.
Question, when did you build your house?
I started building the house, I had the application 1998. I had the foundation put in late 98. I actually started building mid-1999. I was never aware that he even applied for a variance to put a stone yard in, until it was in. I wasn't living here full-time until 2010. Late 2010, I finally moved up here full-time. I was coming up here part-time. Now that I'm here full-time, it's insane. The Jake break and everything. It's crazy. I mean, the silica dust. I don't know what the acid smell is. It's, you know, we have well water too. And it's not only you have Jeff Collins Stone Yard, you got Jeff Collins Trucking there. You got all those vehicles now, the 18-wheeler, you got everything. How does this happen? How can everybody turn a blind eye to this and just let it keep going and going and going? Any comments? I mean, Keith, you had a letter that's right in that file that it was anecdotal.
Well, it's normally, we don't have any jurisdiction over once the variance is issued. And it's up to the zoning officer to keep it under control or bring it back, one or the other.
Right, but the original variance being applied for didn't meet the statutes. The excuse was anecdotal. It was incompetent. There was nothing there to say that hardship existed. It was more out of convenience. It's convenient for me to step out of my front door and I'm right in my office. It was spot zoned. Spot zoning is illegal in almost every county in New York State. It was spot zoned from day one.
So you're asking us to reverse a use variance. Is that what you're saying?
Pardon?
You're asking us to reverse a previously permitted use variance?
I'm asking you to go back to the original variance. Go back to the original 2,000 square feet, selling, building, and landscaping stone. Not manufacturing stone, not operating trucks and a payloader and gravel and sand and mulch and everything else that's there. You can see what's there. Everybody sees it. You drive right by it every day.
And if I may, just to add to that, it's my understanding that if this application is denied, again, my understanding is that the reason that Mr. Collins made this application in the first place is that he was given some guidance that he either had to live with the original variance or he had to apply for a new variance that would encompass the present use. So our position is that if the board denies this application, hopefully the code enforcement officer will then make sure that Mr. Collins goes back to the original use that's already been approved. So I wouldn't say that Mr. Delvecchio is asking you to take any action with the old variance. It's please hold him to that old variance by not granting him a new one that ratifies this huge expansion that he's done over the last decade or so.
I don't believe the figures that are in front of us ratify a huge expansion. He's actually asking for a fairly minor area variance. And it would seem to me by your argument, you're asking us to adjudicate the case that's in front of the Ulster County Supreme Court. So we don't have any ability in this board to force Mr. Collins to renege on the previous area. You don't have the ability, Mr. Chen, you don't have the ability to negate a previous use variance.
No, but this is some blatant violation or would have to be something pretty terrible.
Well, so we're not seeing that in the application that's before us today.
I think that the issue that I'm trying to point out is that even though the present application may only ask for some minor area variances, that misses the point. The entire use as it stands today, whether those small area variances are granted or not, the entire use far exceeds what he's currently allowed to do under his existing variances that he got back in 2000 or so.
Okay.
So any additional variances, again, ratify what he has done in expanding far beyond the scope of his existing variance, and by denying that, by holding him to the original variance that he was granted, that puts the ball back in the court of the code enforcement officer and allows the code enforcement officer then to enforce that variance and hold Mr. Collins to what he was allowed by this board to do 17 or so years ago.
You know, it's hard to believe that what's happened over the past 12 years, that the board is even considering allowing him to expand a little bit. You know, he went 2,000 square feet to 38,000. Now if you're going to give him an inch, he's going to take 10 more miles. And no one's going to say anything, and it's all going to be ignored, and we're going to go around the block again. It's horrendous to live there, next to this. Horrendous.
And Mr. Tuck, the front frontage.
Let me answer your first question you just talked about. What the original variance doesn't have a specification of is how much land he was going to use for stockpile. They never granted a specific square footage. The variance that you're looking at, the application, goes back to that open space. Okay, if you go by the bulk regulations as to his lot is 3.28 acres roughly, which is about 143,000 square feet.